I cannot believe I have to make this video. Hey everyone, it's me, Mutsuki Yuko, the Sawduxer here, and this video is going to be a bit different from my normal fare. And no, it's not a 13-minute build-up to a Ligma joke this time, I promise. You see, a few weeks ago, Twitter managed to get Y'shtola, one of my favorite characters in Final Fantasy XIV, and my one true love, trending. Now, at first, I was pretty hyped to see what all the buzz was all about, but upon scrolling through the tab and seeing the countless posts about how Y'shtola is a flat character, or doesn't have any character development, or is just popular because she's a hot cat girl, I quickly realized that I was going to have to make a video I never thought I would. So today, I'm going to be speaking in defense of Y'shtola Rhul. So, before I start off, I did want to acknowledge that, of course, people are going to have different opinions about a character, and that's totally fine. I'm not trying to argue that you should like Y'shtola as a character just because I do, and I can't say Y'shtola isn't boring, because whether or not you find a character interesting is a subjective thing, and I can't really argue against that. I also wanted to say up front that, despite Y'shtola being my favorite character in Final Fantasy XIV, I do want to acknowledge that her role in the story isn't perfect, and I do understand certain complaints, like how she keeps getting herself into deadly situations, only to make it out relatively unscathed every time. I can see how this would lead to a sense of her constantly cheating death, and why that might make you less inclined to connect with Y'shtola as a character, especially if you didn't already like Y'shtola beforehand. I would argue that this is definitely a problem with the Scions in general, but it's more prevalent with Y'shtola than any of the others. I'll talk more on this later, but I did want to acknowledge it here so people don't think I'm ignoring the flaws surrounding Y'shtola, just because I'm biased towards her. Also, this video took a bit longer than I expected to make, mostly due to PC-related shenanigans, and because of that, most of the script was written before 6.1 came out, which definitely has a heavy focus on Y'shtola. I don't really think anything that happens in 6.1 really changes any of what I'm about to say, as while it does show off sides of Y'shtola that do add to her character, the complaints I saw against Y'shtola were made before 6.1 dropped. So most of what I'm about to say focuses on what we see of Y'shtola's character before 6.1. So what were those complaints? Well, a shocking number of people seem to think that Y'shtola either doesn't have a personality, that she's a flat, one-dimensional character, and or that she doesn't get any character development throughout Final Fantasy XIV. The idea that Y'shtola doesn't have a personality is baffling to me. I understand not necessarily liking her personality. As I mentioned before, liking or disliking a character's personality is subjective, and just because I like Y'shtola doesn't mean that everyone will. But I saw a surprising number of people say that people just like Y'shtola because she's the mascot character of Final Fantasy XIV. She doesn't have any substance to her character, but she's a cute cat girl, so she's popular. My only response to that is, what? On the surface, and especially for newer players who might still be in the early stages of A Realm Reborn, I can understand where this idea that Y'shtola doesn't have a personality comes from. She's a very reserved and aloof character, especially compared to the other three Scions you can meet before officially joining their ranks. Her interactions with the player early on lack the friendliness of Thancred's witty banter, and Papalymo and Ida have a contrasting dynamic between Papalymo's grumpy seriousness and Ida's clumsy and friendly demeanor. By comparison, Y'shtola's early interactions with the Warrior of Light are polite and professional, but gives away very little in terms of her personality. It also doesn't help that, throughout A Realm Reborn, we don't really spend a lot of time with any of the Scions outside of us being sent on missions, and the one part of the game where we do spend some time with Y'shtola, it's investigating the company of heroes and then helping them set up the banquet before going off to fight Titan. And even then, Y'shtola doesn't really tag along with us for most of that. Post-ARR does give her some banter with some of the other Scions, but I would say it takes until the middle of Heavensward, where we journey with Y'shtola to Idleshire to meet with Master Matoya, where her personality really starts coming through. Her interactions with Matoya are filled with sass, and we finally see a more teasing, personal side of Y'shtola. While we do see a bit of this from Y'shtola with the other Scions, especially Thancred, it's with Matoya, someone she's known for her whole life and has a very close bond and history with, that this really comes out in full force. It paints Y'shtola as a reserved, composed, and collected character who isn't afraid to throw around some wit. She's generally very curt and serious around people she doesn't know, and she comes across as being pretty no-nonsense. However, around people she does know, she lets her guard down a little. She isn't afraid to be a bit sassy and teasing, and her interactions with the other Scions, as well as the Warrior of Light, are a little bit warmer. That doesn't mean, however, that Y'shtola isn't afraid to speak her mind when she needs to, and she can be a bit sharp and witty even to people she doesn't know. Some of the best examples of this are her shutdown on Magnai's advances post-Stormblood, and her calling out of the Sharlayans in front of the Forum in Endwalker. It's a bit more rare to see, but Y'shtola can also get pretty emotional at times, especially in dangerous situations involving people she cares about, like when she steps in to save Lys from Xenos, when she jumps into the cave to save the antidote for the poisoned Knights Blessed, and when she, along with the rest of the Scions, are pleading for the Warrior of Light to live at the very end of Endwalker. It's not like these are things I had to go digging around for in side quests or supplementary materials either. These are in the main scenario questline. I wouldn't say these are really outlandish interpretations of her character, this is just what's in the game. I can't believe I have to say this, but just because you don't like the personality of a character does not mean that character does not have a personality, or is flat or one-dimensional. It's one thing to say that you don't like Y'shtola as a character. As mentioned, everyone is going to have characters they really like, and characters they don't. And if you don't personally vibe with Y'shtola's characterization, that's totally subjective and valid. However, to ignore the depth the game gives her just because you don't like it, and then accusing her of not having any depth, is the actual dumbest take. The second dumbest take is that Y'shtola doesn't get any character development throughout the game. For this, I can kind of understand it a little better, because Y'shtola is what I would consider a mostly static character. This means that, throughout the story, her core personality remains mostly the same. Now, I'm emphasizing mostly because she does change over the course of the story, but admittedly it is somewhat subtle, and I would say for the most part, she's a pretty consistent character throughout the story, especially compared to some of the other Scions like the twins or Thancred. Now, I'd like to point out some things about this. 1. Being a static character does not mean Y'shtola doesn't have any depth, as I just went over about her personality. 2. Y'shtola being a mostly static character is not inherently a bad thing, and doesn't mean she's poorly written. But once again, this is all going off the assumption that Y'shtola is a completely static character who doesn't get any character development throughout the story, which once again is a dumb take. Character development can either be about a character's fundamental personality, goals, and motivations changing over the course of the story, or it can be the writers revealing a new aspect about a character that was always there, but not necessarily apparent to the audience. Good character development is generally there to make a character feel more fleshed out and three-dimensional. I would argue that Y'shtola displays both of these. Admittedly, I do think Y'shtola changes in very subtle ways from the start of A Realm Reborn to the end of Endwalker. It's not very dramatic, and there's no big story or plot moment that her character arc is tied to, but I do feel like Y'shtola does become warmer with the Scions and the Warrior of Light over time. I think this happens in a more profound way than just her opening up more as she gets more comfortable with the Warrior of Light. Throughout the story, her interactions with those around her become softer. While she still maintains a mostly serious air, she joins in on their banter more, and she just generally becomes more comfortable expressing her emotions. Compare how much more outwardly emotional she is in Shadowbringers compared to A Realm Reborn. And even then, Shadowbringers Y'shtola was still mostly quiet and reserved about her concern for the Warrior of Light, compared to how she openly came to address similar concerns after the Scions returned from the moon in Endwalker. At the end of Endwalker, she's right there scolding the Warrior of Light along with the other Scions, admitting a deep concern and worry for the Warrior of Light's well-being. Something I can't see Y'shtola doing with the same emotion if it happened in a previous expansion. Also, after the MSQ, when she's staying at Matoya's cave, the way she speaks about Matoya is different from her earlier interactions with her old master in Heavensward. It's not an in-your-face change, and it happens slowly throughout your interactions over the story, rather than there being one big moment where her character changes, but I don't think that's a bad thing. The beauty of Y'shtola's character development is in its subtlety, not in spite of it. She's a pillar among the Scions, remaining relatively consistent while others go through more open, obvious struggles. And yet, even she can't help but be changed by your experiences together. Every brush with death, every struggle, every fight you overcome together, and you slowly start to see more and more of who Y'shtola is as a character. And at the same time, she slowly changes, allowing herself to become more emotional, get more heated, open up more, joke around more, and be more friendly. Sure, could they have given Y'shtola a more profound and obvious character arc, like maybe showing her struggling with her eyes, or giving her some other conflict or struggle she could overcome with the Warrior of Light? Could they have given her a conversation with the Warrior of Light where she opens up and says that she feels she's grown closer to everyone? Sure, but I don't think that would have felt natural for her in the same way that her current subtle character growth does now. I don't think we need her character development to be spelled out for us, because it's clearly there in the story already. I'm not saying subtle is better in all cases, or that Y'shtola's character development is somehow superior because it's subtle and not in your face. I just think that, for Y'shtola, it really complements her character. I think this idea that Y'shtola doesn't change or get any character development at all just isn't true, and I think that saying a character is poorly written or doesn't have any depth because they remain mostly consistent throughout the story is also untrue. In fairness, I don't think that Y'shtola's role in the story is always perfect. I mentioned it a little at the beginning, but Y'shtola has wound up in quite a few deadly situations where she winds up narrowly avoiding death. Now, I don't think this is exclusive to Y'shtola among the Scions by any stretch, but there are some more egregious examples, like her sacrifice to save the Knights Blessed, or her sacrifice in Ultima Thule, though that last one literally is the one case where it happens to all of the core Scions. Now, I don't think Y'shtola should have died in any of those situations, but I do think having her almost die that many times definitely hasn't done her any favor in terms of endearing her to the player base. And even I found myself rolling my eyes in Endwalker. Once again, this doesn't apply exclusively to Y'shtola, and is certainly not unique among the Scions, but I'd be lying if it didn't happen to her more than the others. There's also the fact that they made a big deal about her eyes and her new way of seeing being detrimental mid-Heavensward. And that plot point hasn't really come back in any significant way since. I know it'll probably come back at some point in the future, but the fact that it's literally never really been addressed directly, and all the Scions just kind of found out off-screen and accept it like it's no big deal, is kind of silly to me. I personally thought they would at least make a bigger deal about it being a secret, but it never really comes up again, and I can't imagine that all the Scions don't already know by now. I would argue that both of these are more to do with Y'shtola's role in the story rather than Y'shtola's character herself, but I want to be fair and note that, while I really like Y'shtola as a character and her growth throughout the game, I don't think her story is flawless, and I can understand complaints about that. I also do think that, moving forward, especially considering the focus Y'shtola has been getting in 6.1, I would like to see the story explore Y'shtola as a character more. While I do think the subtlety in her character development has complemented her so far, I do think that failing to explore Y'shtola's character in a more overt way, especially given that the current story direction seems to be driven by Y'shtola's motivations and curiosity, would be a misstep. Though, judging by what we've seen in 6.1 so far, I highly doubt that's something we're actually going to have to worry about. Ultimately, I understand that not everyone is going to love Y'shtola as a character. Everyone is going to be drawn to different characters for different reasons. Despite the fact that I really like Y'shtola and I think she has a really interesting character, that doesn't mean everyone else will. I wasn't trying to argue that you should like Y'shtola, or that everyone should find her and her character development interesting and appreciate it. I just wanted to argue that, whether you like it or dislike it, she does have a personality, she does have a character arc, and to all the people I saw saying that people just like her because, hot cat girl, that just because you don't like a character or find them interesting, doesn't mean there aren't reasons other people do. Also, fuck. In all seriousness, thank you guys for watching. I know it's been a bit since I've gotten a lore video out, and I'm definitely working on rectifying that, but I really wanted to do a discussion video about Y'shtola, especially after seeing so many people bashing Y'shtola for silly reasons. I realized the fact that I didn't get this video out right away and then 6.1 dropped, and really focused on Y'shtola, and gave us a lot of new scenes with her, probably makes this video seem a bit pointless, and admittedly it is a little petty and self-indulgent on my part to make an entire video defending Y'shtola just because some people were wrong about her on the internet. I know I keep mentioning it, and I just mentioned it again 5 seconds ago, but don't worry guys, I do have a new lore video in the works that should be coming out next week. And I also have a huge discussion video on my thoughts on Endwalker planned as well. I do want to start uploading here a bit more, though I realize this isn't the first time I've said that, only to, well, not do that. And I'm going to try to stick to a more consistent upload schedule. I might not always upload a lore video, or even a discussion about Final Fantasy XIV, but I would like to aim for a video out every week. Outside of YouTube, a friendly reminder that I do stream over on Twitch, though admittedly my stream schedule has been a bit of a chaotic mess right now, but I am trying to get that back on track. I also have a Twitter that I've been trying to be more active on, so do be sure to follow me on there if you haven't already. I would really appreciate you guys checking me out. With that being said, thank you guys for all the support. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like, drop any questions, suggestions, or comments down below, and subscribe if you want more Final Fantasy XIV content from me. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.